Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And we are back in the studio.
Chatting about the new OneGuard commercial. When did that happen?
How'd that get there?
You know what they say, between the breaks, all the fun stuff happens.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, speaking of OneGuard, and in residential service contracts, that's one of the best things I tell people about how to stay out of court is, let's put some of the issues that may occur after the closing onto a service contract. Because what invariably happens, I've had it happen multiple times, believe it or not, that I'd sell the house, air conditioner checked out fine with the inspector. 2 weeks later, it goes out because it doesn't take much time for just all of a sudden go out.
Right.
Call something like OneGuard, come out and fix it. I mean, it's, I have not sold a house without a service policy since probably the early 80s.
Wow. And he hasn't sold a house since the early 80s either.
Not true.
I'm just messing with you, Rob.
I know, because it's easy, right?
But there is somebody right next to you who's looking possibly at selling their home.
Actually, I'm thinking, he said if he got an offer today, he would sell. And
that is
I told
correct.
him, if he did sell,
Hey,
he could go buy that new house for Kim.
Everything is for sale.
Everything is for sale. You heard it right here, Kim. Okay?
So I think you were just looking for what, 300,000?
$300K. I'm out today.
Yes. He'll be speed dialing all of us.
I will find a mover. Paying cash.
We actually happen to know some. Anyway.
But I like it when Rob mentioned about a residential service contract, and I think that's why important is to have a realtors or an agent representing you when you sell or buy a house.
Right.
Because I've closed a lot of residential properties in my title company, and I've noticed the deals in which the buyers are not being represented by realtors or agents, they miss this point.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't really. I thought they were okay for a long time, but I actually had somebody move into over on Drexel, a house over in Highland Village. It's an older home, and they moved into it. Didn't turn their air conditioner on, their heater on rather, for about 6 months because I sold it to them in like May or June.
Right.
First time they turned the heater on, of course, cracked heat exchanger. Right. It's an old unit. The warranty company came out and replaced the entire thing because they couldn't find parts for it.
Wow.
So for at that time it was $35 trip charge. Now I think it's $45. So for $35, they got a brand new heater.
And
that's pretty awesome.
And what Chris was saying is true. I am a thorough believer in this market, in any market, but in this market, in the real estate market, use a professional, use a trained, licensed realtor who can walk you through that process, who can show you the ups and downs, who can protect you against some of the things people don't know. Because a lot of times you mentioned, Chris, you end up closing deals that are for sale by owner, or people who are doing a one-on-one transaction, et cetera, et cetera. They miss things.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And I've looked at some of the contracts, which are, I guess, put together by folks who try to do it themselves for sale by owner. Boy.
Yes.
That
says it all, right there, boy.
Right there, yeah.
From an attorney who is a closing attorney for a title company. I can't advise them because I don't represent them. But I wish they had gone to an agent who could have helped them better.
Yeah.
You want to call like timeout in the middle. Okay, timeout. This is off the record here.
And the thing is, our promulgated contracts are really pretty simple. They're written in lay terms, but you still have to kind of know how they work and what to do with them. And a lot of people don't like attorneys until they need one.
Oh, absolutely.
So I always encourage people to keep a great relationship with an attorney if you're going to be in the real estate industry, or if you're buying or selling, know an attorney that you can at least, pick up the phone, call, pay a little bit of a fee to get some good advice if they're not sure. It's really, you pay me now or you pay me later. Later's going to be a lot more expensive.
Oh, yeah. And Chris says all the time, Chris's phone is on and available to take those phone calls. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on. I mean, in the typical real estate transaction, you obviously have two parties. You've got a buyer's party and you've got the seller's party. And sometimes what happens is those...
All I heard was party.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree. Yeah. But in those transactions, you can have misinterpretations. One side believes one item, one side believes the other items. What are some of the common things that you're seeing, Chris, when it comes to a typical residential real estate transaction? Because you do obviously commercial and residential right there. Well, what are some of the common things or the most common things I would say that you see agents call you about maybe some misinterpretations that went on, or about what you're representing them on?
Okay. I think most on a residential contract, I think probably the most misunderstood item is the return of earnest money. How and when it's going to be returned to one party. A lot of folks automatically believe that if I don't want to go forward, then I'll get my earnest money back. But I mean, they fail to understand that there's an option period. When you pass the option period, you're on the hook.
Right.
Unless the lenders reject the property or reject your loan application, then you can't get your earnest money back.
Right.
But a lot of buyers, especially buyers who are not represented by realtors or agents, misunderstood that point.
Yeah, there's some negotiating, and actually it's a buyer's contract. There's a lot of holes in it to get out, and Nicole can certainly attest to that. But there's a couple of things that you can terminate a contract. One of them, of course, is if you can't get credit approval within the negotiated number of days. And I think the market in this area is about 21 days to get that.
Right.
But if you go beyond that day and you don't tell people the other side that you have not gotten credit approval, you're on the hook for that earnest money. And that's what a lot of people, especially the ones that are not represented, don't understand. The other out is, of course, is the addendum for the mandatory HOA. There's a period of time that they have it to get that document to the buyers, and if they don't get the document to the buyers, they can terminate up to the day of closing, or if they do get it to them, they still have 3 days right to terminate after 3 days of receiving that. So there's a lot of things there, but you got to be aware of them.
I agree. Yeah.
And you mentioned right there, because a lot of times you also have in a contract, you have in the baseline of the contract, you have that option period, but then you also have a financing addendum. And that finance addendum is what gives them the alternative to be able to get finance. You mentioned in 21 days.
That's market. It's negotiable.
And it's all negotiable, right? You can negotiate that 10 days, 20 days.
Well, this
Nicole
market,
with me 5 days. I mean, it's
and a lot of people don't understand that the termination has to be in writing.
Yeah.
You gotta to fax it over, or at least nowadays we may be able to email it over if the contract allows for email delivery.
Avis Wukash is the chairman of the commissioners for TREC, Texas Real Estate Commission, and I just adore her. She had a great saying. I have never forgotten this. And I'm using it in all my classes when I teach. Is that contracts don't die. You have to kill them. And
that's
it's true,
a good one.
Because there's some, even in the contract it says that the terms of the contract will survive the closing. And I mean, there's a lot of things that, if there's things were promised or things like that, you can go back to, hey, this is part of it. Have you ever get some things like that? People close and what happened was not what was supposed to happen. And
oh, absolutely. There are a lot of provisions in the contract that survive the closing. I mean, the buyers use provisions in the contract after closing to go after the seller and the seller's agent if they knew about certain things and failed to disclose it or disclose it incorrectly in the seller disclosure form. So,
and the other thing I tell everybody, because Rob was saying this as well, is, and for all those out there, remember, verbal is non-binding. Chris, talk a little bit about that, because people don't realize is if you're in the process of negotiating, you have a written contract, and then, because I've seen this before, at closing, they're sitting there going, oh, well, yeah, you said this, and then the other party says, well, I didn't realize, or they're taken aback by it, or the agent's like, well, you can't say that. Verbal is non-binding. Verbal is not in a way to agree upon a negotiation. It has to be done in writing.
I agree with you, Christopher. I mean, in real estate transactions, it has to be written down. But nowadays, we accept email as a form of contractual agreement. So the better it is a signed contract and sign amendment. But certain things, like if I agree to $1,000 seller's contribution to fix the heater, that has to be signed and in the form of an amendment to the contract by the sellers and the buyers, and the sellers. Yeah.
And you have to be very careful with that. Yeah. For example, on my email, I have a disclaimer at the bottom that states that anything that transpires in the email conversation is not binding. That way, myself, my buyers, and my sellers are not bound to what is stated in that email unless it is on a track or on some type of promulgated form.
Yeah, and I would agree because, one of the things that I see sometimes, because we talk about this, is an individual put, hey, by the way, Nicole, I want to see if the sellers would be willing to do this, right? And so in their mind, you said, I'll check on it. But I hate to say it, a lot of times they don't see the I'll check on it.
Well,
they just see as, well, I requested this to be done.
Yeah, and there's two types of law out there. There's statute and there's common law. Common law is established by court cases and what the decisions were. And there's a decision out there right now that they took emails that were going back and forth, and the buyer was buying a house, and then of course via email thought they had an option to buy another piece of property from the same seller. And the seller said, no, you don't have an option. And then what happened is that they were sending them a carbon copy with every email. And since the seller didn't object to it, the court found that it met the statutes of fraud to have it in writing. The statutes of fraud 101 is that everything has to be in writing for real estate. So you can. And the thing is, agents are not legally allowed. We are not general agents. We're special agents. We are not allowed to enjoin our principals into agreements.
Right.
That's at all. But they found that since the seller was in the thread of the email, that it met the statutes of fraud, and they got that option. So you got to be really careful about what you email. Have you found anything like that, Chris?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Email are now an acceptable form of communication and be admitted to the court in Texas. So if this one party admits that is his or her email,
right.
Whatever he or she written out in that email in exchange with the other party will be admitted to court and will be used as evidence against the party who wrote that email.
And I have a question for you as well. Along those lines, what about text messages? How are those legally? Are they legally binding?
Now, I haven't run into a lot of cases where the courts have come down on the text messages. Because, of course, there got to be...
it's coming.
It's coming.
It will be coming. I agree.
I promise you, it's coming.
After this show, they're like, "Oh my, that's a great idea."
Yeah, I think if
negotiate a whole darn contract via text, I'm sure that's.
I promise you, it's already happened.
Yeah, I guess my thinking is as long as the party who issued that text message admit that he or she did issue the text messages, I think eventually the court will come down and say, yes, if you the one who issued the text messages, we're going to use that as evidence.
Well, and you would imagine that what's going to happen here eventually, the way communication has changed, the way social media has picked up, the way a lot of that stuff is going on, one of the things you'll end up seeing is, like anything, the courts will eventually make a decision. There'll be a case. The court will make a decision, and then new laws or regulations, et cetera, will be put in place because of that. It's typical, and it happens all the time.
I'm hearing music.
You know what else happens all the time is we have to do a break.
Well, we got to pay for the show.
And we have to pay for the show. So everybody, stay tuned. We'll be right back.